Hi everybody, this is Steve Ludwig, host of Steve Ludwig's Classic Pop Culture and the Beatles Hour with Steve Ludwig at planetludwig.com. Here's an interview we did with May Pang on November 4th, 2014. It's from show number 65. To hear the entire show, check out the menu at planetludwig.com. And now, please enjoy the interview. Surprise, surprise, Sweet Bird of Paradox from John Lennon's Walls and Bridges album. John, of course, singing, writing. He wrote that song for our next guest, Miss May Pang. May is an author, activist, radio show host. She was John Lennon's companion and confidant for really much longer than what most of the public knows as the 18-month Lost Weekend. The weekend was anything but a lost weekend. And in my opinion, it was John's most creative and positive and busy period in his musical life, and certainly due in no small part to May Pang's positive attitude toward life and toward John himself. It's a pleasure to welcome to the show, Miss. And it's my pleasure to welcome to the show, Miss May Pang. Hi, May.
Hi, how are you, Steve? I just can't believe it. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, did I do all that? I guess I did.
That's just some of what you did. We're going to get to other things throughout the interview as well. May, like I said in that intro, for me, and I'm a first-generation Beatles fan, the period of time that you were with John, as a girlfriend, if you don't mind me using that term,
right,
was certainly his most creative and productive and positive. I know Walls and Bridges is such all different styles of music. Can you just give our listeners, those who might not be aware of your background with John, how you first worked for him, and then we're going to talk all about your tremendous book, Instamatic Karma.
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of people don't realize I actually worked for a few years. I worked at the offices of Apple Records in New York, and it's also being handled by Alan Klein, who was managing, and a lot of people may know his name. But it was really a great office, and it was a great training ground for me because I saw a lot of different people. I met Ringo, Badfinger, George Harrison, and then Jackie Lomax, and they were all coming through the office, and then John and Yoko, and for some reason they chose me when I was working there to help do a couple of things. And the first project I worked with them were like two movies. Two little vignettes that Yoko had done. One was called Fly, and the other one was called Up Your Legs Forever.
Right.
And I had to help them with, like, the first one was Up Your Legs Forever, and we had to do trying to get people to come in and donate their legs for peace.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of interesting, calling up people, and Yoko would say, Here's my phone book, and just call them up, say you're my assistant, tell them you want to have them come down and donate their legs for peace. And I'm talking about people like Andy Warhol, Jacqueline Kennedy, Osamu Noguchi, and I'm looking at this going, I got to call these people, and it was quite fascinating. They were like, some of them just said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm out of town, trying to be polite.
I'm going to go out of town.
Yeah, and then after doing that, I didn't even do it because I just felt weird. I mean, we also got people off the street, and when they realized that John and Yoko were really there, I mean, some of them just wanted to show a little more than their toes to their thighs. So we had a few people showing their birthday suits off, so it was really funny. And then after that, we did Fly, which was about a fly crawling over a nude woman's body, and you get this camera following this fly. So that was another interesting.
I remember seeing that on PBS. Both of these on PBS way back when.
Oh my God, it was quite interesting.
Yes,
because it was the flies in the winter was hard to get.
Would you import flies in, for crying out
Well,
loud?
you can actually buy them from certain laboratories.
Okay, I was going to say, sure.
And then some of them were half dead, and then we got college students that were volunteers, and they said, "Where else can we get flies?" And we went into like Chinese restaurants, you know. It was quite funny.
Yeah.
So that's what we were doing. Then it started. They would go back. They went away, and then every so often they'd be calling. We want this. We want that. And the phone calls used to come to me, and then and then I went to England. I was there when they filmed the Imagine. I was on the in the house when they were filming the Imagine video. And it wasn't a video. It was meant for that whole movie that they were making.
Right.
Again, called Imagine. How many Imagine films can we have? But
yeah, really.
I know the title.
Imagine the biography. Imagine the movie.
Exactly. So I'm always saying, which Imagine are we talking about?
Right. Yeah.
So I was in there, and it's funny because I look at the rug that where the piano sat in the whole house. They just had that rug put in, and when John and I lived together, John asked to have that shipped to our apartment, so we had the same rug.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you and John become companions, or?
Well, that was after them working at the house. John and Yoko were going through their little personal problems, and anybody that was working there can feel it. Let's put it that way. And we all knew it without saying it. And then one morning she comes into my office and says, "I think, John and I are not going to get along." And I'm looking at her like, "Okay, what does that have to do with me?"
Where are we going with this?
Yeah, I know. And then she says, "You don't have a boyfriend." And then it just sort of hit me, and I went, "I'm not interested." And he goes, "Oh, I know you're not really interested in John, but, he needs to have somebody, that's going to be nice to him, and you'll be perfect." I said, "I'm not interested." And it really something that I did not want to know about. And she was pushing it, and I'm going, "I'm not interested." And the misconception here was that it was really her that snapped the finger and that John went, and it wasn't. It got to the point, John didn't know what was happening. She was just trying to orchestrate things. And in the end, John finally said, "Well, you know what? If she's going to continue this line of where it's going, then I'm going to do it on my time." And so he approached me, and I looked at him and said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I don't know, but I guess I always liked you, and I, didn't realize it." And so she realized it, and so it was, whatever it may be. And if it wasn't for John's approaching me, I would not have gone on. This is not something I wanted.
Well, good for you, May, I must say.
No. Yeah, because a lot of people thought, it's because she snapped the finger and John went, and it's a lot more complicated, and it wasn't as cut and dry as that. And it was John who actually approached me, because I was just flabbergasted by that whole thing, and John was just as nervous, and the two of us were like avoiding each other in the house.
Whereas before this, obviously, you just had a nice
we
business
could talk,
relationship.
And now it's
sure.
And it was very uncomfortable. And then John finally said, and I had no idea that. I just thought we've come back to normalcy by him saying, "We got to go back and finish the record." We were working on Mind Games at the time, and it was just everyday normal. And then all of a sudden, things started to change once I got into the elevator with him. That was it.
In your book, Loving John, your first book, you describe so many of these incidents so well. And with Instamatic Karma, May, if I may, before we go on, I'd like to read a couple of quick reviews of your book. This is of May's most recent book, Instamatic Karma. It's a photographic collection of pictures by May Pang. Through over 150 photographs, May Pang captures a sense of both Lennon's love of America and her own deep affection for Lennon. The collection ultimately works as a heartfelt portrait and rare glimpse into the world of one of the most influential musicians in pop culture history. Highly recommended. That's from the Library Journal. And also, the love May has for John emanates from every single photo in this book. I found myself in tears more often than not, and usually with a huge smile on my face. May is a wonderful human being, and her photos provide such an intimate glimpse into John's and her life. And May, everywhere you look, there are 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. We're so happy you shared these photos with us. What took you so long?
Well, you know what? It was quite interesting. at first I just didn't think anybody, was really interested. Nobody approached me. I mean, I remember saying it to somebody. I said, maybe I should do a photo. And I said, I don't know who's going to want it. So I just left it in a shoebox, basically under my
Boy,
bed, in the
literally in a
corner.
shoebox.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was just under my bed. People come over and I start showing these pictures and they go, how come the stories we hear don't match up with the photos you're showing us? Is basically what everybody was saying. And I said, well, I don't know. I said, this is the way we actually live. I mean, even my first book, Loving John, it was all based on what the publisher wants. If I said, oh, John, took me by the hand, and he dragged me over to this, they would embellish it to make it something else. Mm-hmm. And I used to get really uncomfortable with that. So they knew I balked a lot. So they did as much as the publishers back then, the first book, they did as much as they could, and and then they embellished as much as they could with as much as I would allow it, to a point. And I mean, I balked, and then they did what they wanted anyway. So I didn't have much choice back then. I was what they would call green at the time.
Yeah, well, green, naive, innocent to the whole operation.
And I'm glad that St. Martin's Press came up and they stepped forward and they said, we're going to do it. And I was like, really? And then I pulled out these photos and, people, because when the book came out, it was the first of its kind, the way it, was written, coming from me. And now here were the pictures that no one had ever really seen. So it was a different.
Yeah. And I mentioned that the book has over 150 photographs, but the narrative that goes with the pictures, May, that you included, so many things, there's so many misconceptions about the relationship you had with, at least in the in the media and what the public thinks with you and John. One of the many things, and I know you have you're pressed for time only because you host Blog Talk radio show called Dinner Specials with Cynthia and May Pang. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mention some things that I've read or that I saw in Instamatic Karma. If you can give a little thumbnail background as to some of the pictures of the things, could we do it that way?
Yeah, sure.
Revisionists, especially video revisionists, the song Number 9 Dream, that's you whispering and calling out John's name. I think so many people assume it's Yoko, especially because of the video, if people have seen the video. But that's you. You're all over Walls and Bridges, aren't you?
That was an album that we completely did ourselves with nobody else, no other involvement. John was the sole producer. He didn't need another producer. He did that one on his own. And Whatever Gets You Through the Night, the single, was John's only number one single in his lifetime.
That is so hard to comprehend.
Yeah. And that I'm talking about in his lifetime as a soloist.
Right, of course. That's sure.
In case anybody else didn't understand it. It's in his lifetime, because I know a lot of people say, well, starting over, but that wasn't in his lifetime. So we're talking about while he was alive. And, and it's true, there was a lot to it. So go ahead. Yes, it's me. It's me singing also the background along with John, Laurie Burton, and Joey Dambra. There's 4 of us singing the chorus.
And you received a gold record for your efforts.
Yeah, John wanted me to have that.
Well, you should. That's especially a Number 9 Dream. I mean, you're John. That's such an important part and such a well-known part of the song. You deserved recognition for that, at least. But you did so much more. You mentioned Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Another misconception. This is what I heard anyway. That when John appeared with Elton John Thanksgiving evening at Madison Square Garden, November 28th, 1974, that was a big, John and Yoko got back together. But that's not quite accurate, is it?
No, it isn't. I mean, I told her that John was going to perform, and she said to me, I want to get tickets. I said, well, don't worry, you'll get tickets. She knew what was happening. In fact, the gardenias that you see John wearing on his lapel, and I think Elton's wearing, were sent from Yoko backstage before the show. So she was around. We just didn't know when she was arriving. That's true. We didn't know when she was going, but we knew she was going to be there.
You were on stage.
Yes, I was like less than 10 feet away from him. I'm near, where Elton is playing the piano, and I was in the same site so that John could turn his head and see me. And when he saw that I was bopping and whatever and smiling, he knew that he sounded fine.
Rhetorical question number one. What was that like when John came out on stage?
I have to tell you, I've never experienced it. So he was so nervous because he still got a little stage fright until he gets going, and he stood there, and I've never felt where the garden raising the roof. I mean, I thought we were going to go through the floor because the ground starts to move. The stage was moving. It just sort of just made me a little nervous.
A couple of my friends were there, and they said it was just everything was vibrating. The seats, the banisters, the poles, everything. Oh, my gosh. My not at the time, but now my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, she and her brother had tickets, but it was Thanksgiving night. They had no idea John was going to be there. They said, well, we can always see Elton John again. And they didn't go. I know. How about that?
Oh, my God.
So, I know. Of course, not knowing John was going to be there. Are you kidding?
Well, someone else wrote to me recently and said, we had heard rumors that he was going to be there. He said, but once I saw you walk up, when I saw you in the background, he says, I knew John was there.
Wow.
So he saw me wandering. So it was funny.
Now with Harry Nilsson, I mean, boy, I guess I don't even know if it's fair to call Harry Nilsson underrated, but because he is, for people in the know, I mean, what a great singer, songwriter. The album Pussycats that John produced with Harry Nilsson.
Right.
I saw you a couple of weeks ago at the Chiller Convention. You told a great story about the orchestral part. And was it Mucho Mungo and Mount Elga?
No. It was the song was Many Rivers to Cross.
Many Rivers to Cross. Could you tell how that and Number 9 Dream have a connection?
You listen to it, John actually created the orchestral arrangement for Many Rivers to Cross, which was Harry's bit. And so when it came time to do our album, he felt that since Harry's album didn't really take off as it should have, but he said it's too good an arrangement to have wasted it just to sit there. So he took the arrangement back, and he created Number 9 Dream. So
Beautiful.
That's where that, so if you listen, so if you hear it, you can hear the similarities in there.
I know Harry, and John as well, were complex characters, and it's not fair to ask you to just summarize Harry Nilsson in a sentence or two, but what would you say about Harry Nilsson?
You know what? He was a talent that was, excuse me, that was fantastic. I mean, he had a beautiful voice, but he was his own worst enemy. And, everybody thinks that John and Harry were the best of friends. Actually, Harry's best friend was really Ringo. They hung out. We were just there because we got more notoriety for some of the antics, but it was really Ringo. If you read over the years, you could see that.
I also noticed, May, in the documentary, Who's Harry Nilsson and Why Is Everybody Talking About Him? That's pretty clear too, that he and Ringo were the buddies.
Yeah, but again, as you can see in the press, they tagged John.
Yeah.
We had to come back to New York to finish the record because John realized that being around with Harry, I mean, the man could hold his liquor. You couldn't tell. When he was singing, he really was destroying his voice, his vocal cords. John says, "We got to go back to New York. This is insane here. I can't do it." And so, and of course, like the Troubadour and all those incidents, when you're with Harry, and you saw the movie and you heard what Jimmy Webb said and Mickey Dolenz, they said, what would happen if Harry comes asking, to hang out? And every one of them said you had to figure out you had to have 3 days at least with him. And all the wives and girlfriends were like, oh, God, no, he's back.
Yeah.
And, it's because they didn't know where they were going to end up for 3 days, at least a minimum of 3 days. So it was not an easy thing, and I guess I was the gatekeeper, and and they couldn't, Harry couldn't bribe me, and I love Harry, believe me, but he couldn't bribe me because I was like, I needed to protect everyone,
May, I give you so much credit. You're not a drinker, and you
No,
never really were a drinker. How the heck did you survive hanging out with all those people and not? You must have been tempted.
no,
No, good for
no.
you, boy.
I was not. My it's weird. Somebody would say, "Why don't you want?" I said, "No, I'm not even interested." And if I was going to be interested, it wasn't the time. That was not the time to even try it. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying I didn't try it. I tried it on my own time, not during a time where with everybody else. I just
Yeah.
didn't feel the need to. And everybody was trying to get me drunk or high, and I was like, please. And they knew they couldn't get around me.
Yeah, good for you, boy. That's a tough, strong, will-powered woman you are. Again, everyone was speaking with May Pang, and please go to maypang.com. I mean, it's a really neat website. I think it's kind of just been revised as well. You can see May's jewelry, her photos, her books, and May. There's a couple of there are so many incredible photos in Instamatic Karma. Two that stand out. I think the perception was that John and Paul not hated each other, but certainly didn't get along. And boy, the photos that you include with John and Paul together really certainly contradict the whole media feeling about John and Paul. Were they? I mean, I'm sure they weren't like buddy buddies, but there's no way that they were
You,
upset with
you
each
know
other,
what?
was it?
It was John and Paul were like brothers that we don't need to impress each other. And it
Hmm.
and it was and it became that. And they would just come up every time they were in the city. They would call, "Let's go out to dinner. Let's go out for a drink. Let's go out here." We said fine. And it was a lot easier with when I was around because he used to say, "Are you sure you can handle it?" I said, "Handle what? He's he's like your brother.
Hmm.
Forget it. He's a friend that we should deal with. Deal with it. I mean, it was nothing to deal with. They were fine." And I tried to make it as easy as possible, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
And they came anytime, and whenever they felt like it. I didn't make it. There was no questions.
To see the picture of John and Paul just relaxing in the backyard in that appeared to be a very sunny afternoon. First time I saw that, I said, "Wait a minute, they they love each other. They're still buddies." That has got to be one of the greatest pictures for Beatle fans anyway to clear so many things up about their relationship. After the Beatles.
Yes, and then I know people have asked. They said I didn't think they were talking. Believe me, Paul was over at our house when we were in New York. Because that's the other misconception that they thought we lived in L.A. We didn't live in L.A. We borrowed houses. We were doing projects, but we flew back to New York all the time. No, but you
Hmm.
don't hear about that. You only hear about the antics that went on in L.A.
Of
But we didn't
course.
live there. We actually lived in New York, and we flew back and forth a lot. But when we were finally finished with all the projects in L.A., when of course when Paul was in, because his in-laws were there and everything else, all of a sudden they'd be showing up at our doorsteps downstairs. All of a sudden we
Hmm.
had a bell ringing, and they said, "There's a guy named Paul and downstairs and Linda."
He's got a Beatle
Because we had a very
haircut or
old
something.
doorman. We had a very old Irish doorman, and I said, "Paul and Linda." I said, "That's funny." And Mick Jagger was another one that would come over a lot.
Hmm.
So they were the two constant visitors.
Now, the picture in the book when John and Paul were together, in relation to that jam session that we all
Hmm
have heard so much about, was that a couple of days apart, or can you
Day
talk to us
day
about
before
the day
the night.
before? Could you,
Yeah.
could you tell us about that
Well,
jam
we
session?
hadn't seen John and John and Paul hadn't seen each other in years, and they just happened to show up. And it was only later did we find out later that Yoko had sent Paul and at a request like, can you find out what John is interested in? If he wants to come home, this is what needs to be, that type of thing. But and Paul didn't know who I was so at the time. But
Hmm.
so he came in and it was like amazing. And the session had already ended, and it was only whoever was left behind. Uh, we were just doing a jam after John heard the recording that night, and so in essence, I'm part of that recording of one of the last jam sessions with John and Paul because I play tambourine because John said grab a tambourine, come on in. So me and Mal Evans did tambourines.
How
So
was
we
John
were
as a
one of the last people
wow?
to ever jam.
I can imagine. I mean, people that were on the professional musicians who saw John and Paul together during that session. I can only imagine what they must have been. They were probably trying to stay cool, but they must have been saying, it's John and Paul together.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of people, but Stevie Wonder showed up. We didn't actually have a bass player, so this producer left his session and came to ours because he said this is a once in a lifetime, and he left his. And Paul got on a drum, behind the drum kit. There were 3 drummers, and all 3 were gone. So it was Keith Moon, Jim Keltner, and Ringo, and they all left. So we didn't have a drummer. So Paul wanted to be the drummer, and now we didn't have a bass player because each one had left. So there was only a few that stayed behind.
We have a couple of minutes left with May Pang. May I want to read just a couple quotes, and then I have 2 quick things for you to talk to us about. First of all, the way that you were able to get Julian and John back together in each other's lives. Here's a quote from Julian about the time he spent with you and John. We had a lot of fun, laughed a lot, and had a great time in general. When he was with May Pang, my memories of that time with Dad and May are very clear. They were the happiest time I can remember with them. And John mentioned to journalist Larry Kane, I may have been the happiest I've ever been in my life with May. Did you get that?
I only found out about that last quote. In fact, only in the last few years. I had no idea. So, it just sometimes brings a tear to my eye with that.
Yeah, I'm sure. On that horrible night, December 8th, could you just share with us a minute or so how you spent that evening? I know if you don't even want to talk about it, I certainly understand, but I know you spent it with a musician friend of yours.
I called up David Bowie's place after I heard about it, and I ran home. I was actually on the Upper West Side myself. And when I got home, the phone was ringing, and it was Ringo's secretary calling me to find out the hospital, and I told her that it was over. And she just screamed. She goes, "What's wrong with your bloody country?" And she says, "I got to get off and tell everyone." And then I decided to call Bowie because he was the guy that was spending time with us. It was like if Mick or whatever, just because that's how we were. And he was out on a date, and his assistant said, "Come down here. I don't want you to be alone." So I went over, and she goes, "I'm going to find David." So she managed to find him wherever he was on his date. And we spent the evening just, watching this, it was almost not surreal.
Oh, yeah, I think that's the word. Yeah.
Yes, the real situation happening on television. And then afterwards, then I left later, a few hours later. So when the daylight came.
One more picture of the book that is outstanding. I mean, one more. So many, May. When John is signing dissolving the Beatles,
right.
You look at that and you say, it's probably, I can't think of a more historic picture in music. John was the last signature to dissolve the Beatles
as he started it, he ended it. And that was not meant, to do it that way, but it did. And we did it down at Disney World because we were spending our Christmas holiday together in '74. Again, there's that myth, that John went back, and that's not what happened. Here it is, December of '74. We're down with Julian, and the lawyers worked out a few of the problems why John didn't want to sign in New York, and they dragged all the papers down. And what people don't understand is they were still a business, there were still things, and they were still tied up. They may be a band, but they had to unlock themselves legally. And, even though they may have said, "I left the Beatles," they had to all sign this agreement to dissolve. And John was the last signature, and I happened to capture that mid-signature. I didn't even know I had it until I was doing this book, and I couldn't figure out what I had.
Boy.
So.
Final thing, May. If, hypothetically, you're at an event, you come face-to-face with Yoko, how do you think each of you would react to the other?
I've come face-to-face with her.
You have? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I have. Let's put it this way. it's very it's like hello and she walks away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only because I've said hello.
Yeah. And I mean, you know what you know, May.
And that's the whole thing. I've gone up and said hello, and it's
Yeah.
been very dismissive type of thing. Yeah.
Well, May, you have been so. And by the way, happy belated birthday. Your birthday
thank
was
you.
October
It was
24th.
Yeah, October 24th. Yeah, I had a great time. Spent it at Chiller, having the Cowsills sing to me.
I love the cows.
I love them.
Really.
I truly love them. They are fantastic.
You had Paul Cowsill on. You had Paul Cowsill
Yeah,
on
I
your
had Paul
dinner special
Cowsill.
show.
Love him to death. I love the family. Their vocals were even stronger now than they've ever been.
Yeah.
And later on when I did celebrate a couple of days later, I had Simon Kirk and all these people at my party.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
pictures on Facebook that you posted. Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
and you know what? They should come and join me on my Facebook, on my May Pang fan page. It's the picture of me, not and they should just get on there and
Yeah,
like
check
Night
that out,
Black
everybody.
Yeah.
And it's dinner specials with Cynthia and May Pang on blogtalkradio.com, blogtalkradio.blogspot.com.
No, it's blogtalkradio.com. It is .com.
Right, I blew it the first time, but I've heard
okay.
I've heard a few of your shows, May. It's a great show, everybody. And May, I know you're pressed for time because you have your show to do now, right?
Yes.
Into this. And I know it's
and they can go to my website as well,
Yes.
and maypang.com. How simple is that? And look forward to communicating with people. That's where they can find me.
May, thank you so much. I've always been in your corners, as all Beatle fans have. And thanks so much for giving us a few minutes. And it was such a pleasure to speak with you.